Hey English 3. So today we're going to look at the division and classification essay. This kind of breaks down like what the essay looks like. So on Schoology, there's also a quiz. I tried to put the slide number. So if you look in like the right-hand corner down here, it should say like slide 1, slide 2, slide 3. So you kind of know for questions where they connect to. So for this very first slide, the purpose, you need to get a 70% above. So you have to have the purpose for writing the essay. So you have to have the so what. If you don't have a so what for your essay, then it's not going to be passable. So basically what this means is that you can't just talk about the three different types of corona people. You have to say why it matters, what this says about the world today, why it's unique. You can't just talk about the three different types of soccer players. You have to say like why these people matter and why they're important. So you have to kind of have a so what to your kind of division or classification. So if you're dividing, so if you're saying there's three parts to playing a video game, this part, and this part, you have to be able to say, okay, but while there's these three different parts, each part is important, even if it seems simplistic, like just the setup. So that's what the so what is. Limiting the scope and tipping your hat. So what you're doing here, when you tip your hat, you're basically saying, hey, look, there's more than just these three types. There's more than just these three types of people in response to coronavirus. There's more than just these three types of soccer players. And you're kind of giving the different examples. So here, if it's talking about people at West, students at West High, some I remember were the nerd, the freak, and the geek. However, the three most common types of students I saw at West High were the slacker, the hacker, and the attacker. So this student from last year still said, hey, there's some students like the nerd, there's some like the freak, there's some like the geek, and they're giving different types. But the main ones that they're going to focus on, the slacker, hacker, and the attacker. So tip and hat's kind of like, hey, look, I know there's other types of people, but these are the ones I'm focusing on today. The reason that we're doing this is mainly because it says, hey, look, these aren't all the types. There's not only three types. So that way, if someone doesn't fit into one of those categories, they're still like, oh, hey, I still fit. I still belong somewhere. So that's something that can help as well. It also makes sure people know why you're picking the ones that you're choosing. So your reader's like, oh, I see why they're focusing on these three. And it makes sure that you are kind of really giving your reason or providing kind of like a concept as to why you're picking those three and not the other ones. Okay. So your introduction. So basically, your introduction, you have to name your different types of subjects. So you have to name the three you're talking about. So like in the practice essay that we read about the different types of shoppers, there was the amnesiac, the super shopper, and the dawdler. So we had our three different types. So your introduction, you're going to name those types. So your introduction is broken into three main pieces. So first is just generalizing. So this is where you're like introducing people to your topic. So maybe if you're doing soccer players, you're going to say, there's so many, every single person usually has some kind of sport or hobby or club that they really enjoy. When you spend this much time in this sport, you learn more about yourself and more about other people. And then you kind of go into soccer. Or for this one kind of talked about hobby of video games, but I didn't get to video games right away. In my generalization, I still said everybody has a hobby with which to occupy their spare time. Some people enjoy playing sports like running, basketball, and hockey, and others prefer non-physical recreation such as chess and painting. So generalizing is just kind of like thinking of things that relate to your topic in some way, shape, or form. Then what you're going to do is you're going to narrow towards you. So this is where you narrow in towards your topic. So while I personally enjoy all these, my favorite hobby is playing video games. As a matter of fact, my bedroom is littered with all types of games, from sports to superhero games. So you can probably guess this is not an essay I wrote. I do not play a whole bunch of video games. This is an essay from last year. But like the student said, hey, look, this is something similar to me. Like I play video games. I know all about video games. So you're kind of pulling yourself in a little bit, introducing your topic. And then the last one is when you really focus on your main three. So, however, my main three types of video games include the first person shooters, stealth action games, and fantasy games. So you're focusing on those main three in your thesis. All right, so our body paragraphs. So we have three different body paragraphs, one for each type of person or each division if you're doing different categories. So in each body paragraph, you have to name, explain, and then illustrate. So what you'll see here like role type 1, role type 2, role type 3. This is like the amnesiac, the super shopper, the dawdler. You're gonna name, explain, illustrate. So this is what your paragraphs will look like. So notice that there's no quotes. You don't have to have any direct quotes. You're just naming, explaining, and illustrating. We'll kind of break those down here in a second. All right, so when you're naming, this is a topic sentence. So that's the very first sentence of your paragraph. So this is when you're saying, hey, this type of player or video game player is the Sally the shooter up. So maybe she shoots up everybody on the screen and doesn't even like play the game. She just likes watching stuff explode. So you are kind of going to explain that person and how you came about the name. So for example, one type of customer that annoys me is Johnny come lady. This person is, of course, always late. Or while the what's that, Pat, and they give me more Thor are two types of infuriating customers. The most annoying type of customer is the time to leave Steve. This is a person at the store who just can't tell when everyone wants them to go. So you're not only just naming them, you're also kind of saying how they got that name. Then we have our explain group. So this is when you're describing the traits of that person. So you're kind of like defining them. So this type of customer is easy to identify because of their stupid questions and bad smell. Or maybe this type of customer decides to shop for a long list 5 minutes before the store closes. So this is when you're explaining that type of person. Or maybe if you're doing a division essay, you're explaining that part. So you're kind of like defining it, explaining what that person might be like or what that segment might be like. Then we have the illustrate phase. So this is one of the phases that's a little bit harder. So when it comes to the illustrate phase, this is kind of where the storytelling comes in. This is where your creativity comes in. So that show don't tell activity that we practiced a while ago, this is where you're going to be using that. So after you've named and explained your type of group, you have to illustrate with specific examples. So you can tell a story, you can have descriptive details, you can do an antidote, but you have to kind of describe it in a way that's interesting. And usually storytelling is kind of like the best way. A lot of students last year would say, I remember this one time when they kind of went off on that route. But illustrate is when you're like painting a picture for your reader so they can get an idea of what that character is really like. So sometimes using transition helps you kind of get your flow. So use transitions such as, for example, or for instance. So for example, last Friday night, the obnoxious adolescent strolled in nearing closing time. And then you're going into detail about the incident. So why were they so annoying? What were they doing? So you're kind of, that's kind of like your kind of lead in for those transitions. So just being super specific is always good. You want to be illustrative, you want to be descriptive and detailed. That's why we did that show don't tell activity. So even when you're doing your research outline, I'll even have kind of parentheses, don't forget the show don't tell. I want you to show me what that person's like. Don't just tell me they were annoying. Instead, I want you to show me. The child was screaming through the store and wouldn't stop crying because they wanted the toy on the shelf. So I want you to really show me. Don't just tell me the kid's annoying. Show me how. So again, I just kind of wanted to show you the outline again. So you do the type of person, so the amnesiac, their specific traits, and then an example from personal experience. Or if you don't have an example from your own life, you could just say, imagine if. So if you don't have an example from your life, that's okay. You could say imagine if and like make up a scenario. That works as well. So your conclusion paragraph, you're almost there. You're doing great. Conclusion paragraph. So this is when you bring the essay full circle. So you might want to look at your introduction a little bit, but you don't want to copy and paste it. Some of you copy and paste it. Don't do that. So we're trying to look at it maybe for some guidelines, but do not copy and paste. You want the conclusion to be a little bit different. So the first thing you want to do is restate your purpose and thesis. That does not mean copy your thesis and paste it down low. It just means restate it in a different way. You want to mention, again, hey, there's other different types. Don't mention the same types. You're listing new types. So new types of shoppers or new types of soccer players that you didn't even list in your introduction. So you're creating some more. And then again, you're going to reiterate your 3 main types and kind of maybe just briefly describe them or explain them or kind of remind your reader of the story. And then you just wrap it up with your clincher sentence. So a couple of writing tips to help you when you're actually getting down to writing this. So you do not want to do a list. So you do not want to list, this character is blank and blank and blank and blank and blank. That's super annoying and it's not interesting. It just feels like a list. So if you say like, this character was annoying and high-pitched voice and was silly and was irritating, if you're just listing all the different adjectives, that's not showing. You're just giving me a list of qualities. So you want to avoid the list in the most way possible. You also want to make sure that you are explaining. So there's always that common quote like, I don't want to hear the lady screaming. I want you to let her scream. So I want you to like let the reader feel her screaming, not just say the lady screamed. I want you to say the lady's vocal cords cracked and all the people in the store turned around and stared at her as she screamed in the aisle. So you want to make sure it's like coming to life. You can use first person. So you can 100% use first person in this essay, which I think a lot of you will very much enjoy. Make sure, sometimes this gets a little tricky here, this who versus that. So who refers to people. So this is the type of customer who. But if you're talking about an object, that's going to use that. So that refers to objects or animals. So like, this is the car that, or this is the video game that. So make sure you don't mess up those. And I would usually save the best for last, because usually that's a thing your reader remembers the most. Using pronouns, try to use plural. So you want to say not like, when a person goes to the store, you would say when people go to the store. It just makes your reader feel a little more involved. And then your transitions kind of really build coherence. We'll talk more about this in another lesson, but you want to make sure that you're connecting the amnesiac to the dawdler. So you might say, well, the amnesiac always forgets things and takes a long time. The dawdler doesn't forget anything, but yet they still take just as long. Something to kind of connect your characters or connect your different segments in some kind of way. Anyways, I hope you were able to kind of get a better idea of what this looks like. So don't forget, on Schoology, there is a 15-point quiz, and I do have in parentheses like slide numbers, so you kind of go back and forth if that helps you as well. I hope you guys are doing okay. I really miss you. Like, I really miss you a lot. And it's, as quarantine goes on, it's just harder and harder. Like, I teach lessons and I don't know, it's hard not engaging with you guys or seeing you guys every day. So I hope you're all doing well. I'm really thinking about you during this time. If there's anything I can do to make things better, please reach out. We're all in this together and working through it. So if there's anything I can do to help, just let me know. I hope to see your lovely faces soon.